My sister banned me from her wedding for being poor, then the groom's four-star general father saluted me. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't the kind of envelope you simply opened and tossed aside. Thick ivory paper. Gold embossed lettering. The kind of invitation that practically announced its own importance before you even broke the seal. I stood in my kitchen, coffee growing cold in my hand, staring at the elegant envelope lying on the counter. For just a second, I smiled. My little sister was getting married. After everything we'd been through together, after losing our parents, after all the sacrifices we'd made, she had finally found someone she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. I carefully opened the envelope. The smile disappeared. Inside was a beautiful wedding invitation. My name wasn't on it. Instead, there was a small handwritten card tucked neatly inside. Wedding gift information. That was it. No invitation. No ceremony details. No seat assignment. No, we hope you'll celebrate with us. Just instructions on where gifts could be mailed. I looked at it for a long time, wondering if there had been some kind of mistake. Then my phone rang. The screen showed one name. Chloe. My younger sister. I answered immediately. Hey, Chloe. There was no excitement in her voice. No warmth. No nervous happiness that most brides have before their wedding. Instead, she sounded rehearsed. Austin. She paused for a second. I need to talk to you about the wedding. I already knew where the conversation was heading. I noticed something strange about the invitation, I said gently. My name isn't. I know. She cut me off before I could finish. Another long silence. Finally she sighed. I just can't have you there. For a moment I honestly thought I had misheard her. What? I've been trying to figure out how to say this without hurting your feelings. Too late. The wedding is different from what we originally planned. I leaned against the kitchen counter. What does that mean? Brandon's family is very well known. I know. They're old East Coast money. I know that too. You don't understand. Her voice became sharper. They're connected to politicians, military leaders, CEOs, ambassadors, everyone who's anyone. I stayed quiet. She continued. The guest list is extremely exclusive. So? She hesitated. You don't really fit. I closed my eyes. What exactly doesn't fit? It's not personal. Whenever someone says that, it usually is. You work as. She searched for the right words. A government contractor. Yes. You always wear those plain black suits. Yes. You drive that old sedan. Yes. And honestly. She lowered her voice. I don't want Brandon's family asking questions. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What kind of questions? Questions about why my older sister looks. She stopped herself. Ordinary. I laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes pain reaches a point where laughter is the only thing left. Ordinary? You know what I mean. No. I mean. Her frustration finally boiled over. They'll assume you're unsuccessful. There it was. The truth. Not hidden anymore. I don't want them thinking I come from some poor family. The words hit harder than I expected. Poor family. Our family had never been poor in love. Only in money. And even that hadn't lasted forever. Not after I made certain Chloe never had to struggle. I looked out the kitchen window. Rain had started falling outside. Chloe. My voice stayed calm. I'm your sister. I know. When Mom died. I know. When Dad passed 6 months later. I remember. I was 24. Silence. You were 16. She didn't answer. I dropped out of graduate school. Still nothing. I worked 2 jobs. Nothing. I sold Dad's truck. Silence. I took out loans in my own name. Her breathing became heavier. I paid your tuition. I know. I paid your rent. I know. I bought your textbooks. I said I know. Her voice cracked. Then she took a deep breath. And I'm grateful. She said the words quickly. Almost like reading from a script. I'll never forget everything you did. But? She hesitated. But this is different. No. I answered quietly. It isn't. She ignored me. This wedding isn't just about Brandon and me. It's about joining his family. It's about making the right impression. It's about our future. I smiled sadly. Our future? Yes. What future begins by pretending your family doesn't exist? She didn't answer. Instead, she changed the subject. You've always been private. Yes. You never talk about your work. Correct. You never introduce us to your coworkers. No. You disappear for weeks sometimes. That's part of the job. So people assume. She stopped. What? That you're just a nobody. Silence. She didn't deny it. The truth was, I had spent nearly 20 years making sure nobody knew exactly what I did. Confidentiality wasn't just part of my career. It was the foundation of it. The fewer people who knew my responsibilities, the safer everyone remained. Even Chloe. Especially Chloe. She believed I was a low-level defense contractor buried somewhere inside a government office pushing paperwork all day. I had never corrected her. There was never any reason to. I didn't need recognition. I didn't need praise. And I certainly didn't need my own sister looking at me with awe. I only wanted her to live a normal life. One free from classified operations, threat assessments, and the kind of enemies my position naturally attracted. Keeping my career secret wasn't about protecting me. It was about protecting the people I loved. Ironically, that very secret had become the reason my own sister was ashamed of me. Austin. Her voice softened. I hope someday you'll understand. I already understand. You do? Yes. You've decided appearances matter more than people. That's not fair. No. I looked at the invitation again. It isn't. I just don't want any awkward moments. There won't be. I mean it. I won't come. She let out a relieved breath. Thank you. Not. I'm sorry. Not. I love you. Just. Thank you. Before hanging up, she added one final sentence. And Austin. Yes? Please don't come to the estate. I won't. I mean it. I heard you. I'd hate for security to have to remove you. The line went dead. I stood there staring at my phone for several minutes. The apartment felt unusually quiet. On the refrigerator was an old photograph held up by a faded magnet. 2 girls. One around 10. The other barely 18. Standing outside a tiny apartment after we'd been forced to sell our childhood home. Chloe was smiling despite everything. I wasn't. Because I knew what our future would cost. I remembered working the night shift at a warehouse before spending mornings attending classes I would eventually abandon. I remembered skipping meals so Chloe never had to. I remembered secretly paying for her prom dress because she thought a scholarship had covered it. I remembered mailing rent checks with money I'd earned working 70-hour weeks. She never knew. She wasn't supposed to. An older sister doesn't keep score. She simply protects. Watching someone you love succeed is supposed to make every sacrifice worthwhile. Until one day they decide you're the part of their past they'd rather erase. The invitation stayed on my kitchen counter for 2 weeks. Every morning I saw it. Every night I ignored it. Friends asked if I was excited about the wedding. I smiled. Very. No one knew the truth. Then the wedding day finally arrived. Virginia greeted the morning with bright blue skies and warm summer sunlight. The ceremony was being held at one of the most exclusive private estates on the East Coast. The kind of place where senators hosted fundraisers. Where CEOs celebrated billion-dollar mergers. Where invitations were more valuable than reservations at the finest restaurants in Manhattan. I stood in my bedroom wearing the same black suit Chloe had mocked over the phone. It wasn't expensive. But it fit perfectly. I'd owned it for years. People often underestimated how little appearance mattered in my profession. The most powerful people rarely felt the need to advertise it. I picked up a small velvet gift box from my dresser. Inside was a pair of handcrafted platinum cufflinks engraved with Chloe and Brandon's wedding date. Simple. Elegant. Personal. Not flashy. Exactly the way I'd intended. I looked at the box for a moment before slipping it into my car. I had no intention of attending the ceremony. A promise was a promise. I only wanted to leave the gift with the valet and quietly drive away before anyone noticed I had ever been there. At least. That was the plan. I had no idea that before the afternoon was over. Every guest at that wedding, including one of the most decorated four-star generals in the United States, would learn exactly who the embarrassing older sister really was. And Chloe would discover that the person she had spent years trying to hide was the one person in attendance whose respect everyone else had already earned without even realizing it. The GPS guided me through miles of quiet Virginia countryside before the landscape suddenly changed. Towering iron gates came into view, framed by stone pillars wrapped in climbing ivy. Beyond them stretched a winding driveway lined with ancient oak trees, their branches meeting overhead like the ceiling of a cathedral. 2 men in tailored black suits stood at the entrance checking names against a digital guest list. Luxury cars rolled in one after another. Bentleys. Rolls-Royces. Aston Martins. Every vehicle looked as though it had come straight from a showroom. My 10-year-old sedan looked strangely out of place as I pulled into the designated valet lane. The young valet approached with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, sir. May I have your invitation?" I reached into my jacket pocket, then stopped. "I won't be staying," I said. "I'm only here to leave a wedding gift for the bride." The valet nodded respectfully. "Of course, sir. I'd be happy to make sure she receives it." I looked down at the small velvet box in my hands. For a brief moment, I thought about simply handing it over. Turning around. Driving home. Ending the day before it could become another painful memory. But something inside me hesitated. Not because I wanted to attend the wedding. Because I wanted to see my little sister. Just once. Even from a distance. I had watched her grow from a frightened 16-year-old girl into a successful woman preparing to start a new chapter of her life. Maybe. Just maybe. Seeing her happy would make the hurt easier to carry. "I'll walk it over," I told the valet with a faint smile. "I won't go inside." He stepped aside. "Very well, sir." I parked my car in a quiet corner of the lot and picked up the gift. The estate was breathtaking. Perfectly trimmed hedges stretched across acres of green lawns. Marble fountains sparkled beneath the afternoon sun. Fresh white roses decorated every pathway. Soft classical music drifted through hidden speakers, blending with the laughter of guests enjoying cocktails on the terrace overlooking the gardens. Waiters in immaculate white jackets carried silver trays filled with champagne. Women in designer gowns laughed beneath oversized sun hats. Men in custom-tailored tuxedos exchanged business cards while discussing politics, investments, and private clubs. Every conversation seemed carefully polished. Every smile perfectly rehearsed. I kept my head down and walked along the edge of the property toward a side entrance, hoping to leave the gift unnoticed. I had spent most of my adult life blending into crowds. It was second nature. The less attention I attracted, the better. As I reached the marble staircase leading toward the terrace, I heard familiar laughter. I looked up. There she was. Chloe. She looked beautiful. Her wedding dress shimmered beneath the afternoon light, its long train flowing behind her like white silk across polished stone. Her hair was perfectly arranged. Diamonds sparkled around her neck. For just a second, all I saw was my little sister. Not the woman who had excluded me. Not the woman embarrassed by my existence. Just the little girl who used to fall asleep on the couch while waiting for me to come home from my second job. A smile found its way onto my face. I whispered softly to myself. I'm glad you're happy. I turned slightly, preparing to leave the gift on a nearby reception table before walking back toward the parking lot. Then Chloe looked in my direction. Our eyes met. The smile disappeared from her face instantly. Confusion. Then disbelief. Then panic. Without saying a word to the guests around her, she hurried down the wide marble staircase. As she got closer, I could see her expression hardening. Two large security guards noticed her urgency and immediately followed behind. Several nearby guests turned to watch. What are you doing here? Her voice was low, but sharp enough to cut through steel. I lifted the gift box slightly. I just wanted to leave your present. I told you not to come. I know. Then why are you here? I'm not staying. I literally said not to come anywhere near this estate. I only wanted to. She interrupted before I could finish. Do you have any idea how this looks? I glanced around. People had started watching. Some whispered to each other while pretending not to stare. I'm standing here for less than a minute, Chloe. Exactly. She stepped closer, lowering her voice even further. My future father-in-law is entertaining senators, military officials, judges, and business executives. I know. If someone asks who you are. She stopped herself. Then looked me up and down. Only then did I realize what she was staring at. My suit. Simple. Black. Well-fitted. But obviously not designer. She shook her head. Oh my God. What? You actually wore that? I looked down. It's a suit. It's an off-the-rack department store suit. So? She laughed nervously. You couldn't even rent something decent? I wasn't trying to impress anyone. Well, you're certainly accomplishing that. The words stung more than I expected. Not because she insulted my clothes. Because she honestly believed clothing determined a person's worth. I remembered buying her first interview outfit after college. She had cried because she couldn't afford professional clothes. I had quietly handed over my credit card. Buy whatever helps you feel confident. She had hugged me for nearly 5 minutes. Now, she couldn't bear to be seen standing next to me because of a suit. Life had a strange sense of irony. Chloe. I kept my voice calm. I'll leave the gift and go. I don't want it. She folded her arms. I don't want anything that reminds me of this conversation. It's your wedding gift. I said no. She looked toward the two security guards. Please escort her off the property. The older guard hesitated. Ma'am. I gave you an instruction. He glanced at me. Then back at Chloe. Something in his expression suggested he didn't enjoy throwing out a quiet middle-aged woman carrying nothing but a small gift box. Still. It was his job. He stepped forward politely. Sir. Before he could finish speaking, I smiled gently. It's all right. I wasn't angry. I wasn't embarrassed. Mostly. I was tired. Tired of trying to convince someone who had already decided my value. I carefully placed the velvet gift box on a nearby stone table. For after the ceremony, Chloe looked at it as though it were an unwanted package. I told you. You don't have to open it. I won't. I know. One of the guests nearby whispered loudly enough for several others to hear. Who is she? Another woman answered. I think she's some distant relative. Someone else laughed. Must be from the poor side of the family. A few quiet chuckles followed. None of them knew I could hear every word. Years of field operations had trained me to notice conversations most people missed. Normally, those conversations involved threats. Today, they involved my own family. Oddly enough, this hurt more. Chloe crossed her arms tighter. Please leave before anyone important sees you. Anyone important. I almost smiled. Over the course of my career, I'd met presidents, prime ministers, intelligence chiefs, foreign defense ministers, four-star generals, members of Congress, scientists whose names would never appear in history books despite changing history itself. Most of those meetings remained classified. None of those people had ever cared what kind of suit I wore. Yet standing in front of my own sister, I was somehow not important enough to remain on the property for another 30 seconds. I turned toward the parking area. Congratulations, Chloe. She didn't answer. The security guards relaxed slightly, relieved the situation was ending peacefully. I had taken only a few steps when a deep, commanding voice echoed across the courtyard. Is there a problem here? The voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Authority has a sound all its own. Conversations stopped immediately. Music suddenly seemed very far away. The security guards snapped to attention almost instinctively. Guests turned toward the top of the marble staircase. Standing there, surrounded by several distinguished officers in formal military dress, was a man whose presence alone transformed the atmosphere. His uniform was immaculate. Rows of ribbons covered his chest. 4 silver stars rested proudly on his shoulders. General Thomas Vance. The groom's father. One of the most respected military leaders in the nation. His sharp eyes surveyed the courtyard with practiced precision before settling on Chloe. She instantly forced a bright smile onto her face. Oh, General Vance. She laughed nervously. I'm so sorry about this little misunderstanding. The general slowly descended the staircase. Every step seemed measured. Deliberate. This is just. She glanced toward me with visible embarrassment. My estranged older sister. The general remained silent. She wasn't invited. Still nothing. I was simply asking security to escort her away before she disturbed the guests. By now nearly everyone attending the wedding had gathered along the terrace overlooking the courtyard. Dozens of curious eyes shifted between Chloe, the general, and me. Brandon hurried down the stairs as well, clearly trying to understand what had happened. He looked confused more than angry. Dad? General Vance didn't respond. His eyes had never left my face. For a long moment, he simply stared. His expression changed. Confusion. Recognition. Then complete disbelief. The color drained from his face. His eyes widened ever so slightly. As though he were looking at someone he never expected to see again. The entire courtyard fell into absolute silence. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the birds seemed to disappear into the quiet. Then, without saying a single word to Chloe, without acknowledging Brandon, without even glancing at the security guards, General Thomas Vance stepped past every person standing between us and walked directly toward me. General Thomas Vance walked toward me with the steady confidence of a man who had spent his entire life leading others into impossible situations. Every eye in the courtyard followed him. The conversations had stopped. The musicians on the terrace lowered their instruments. Even the waiters carrying trays of champagne stood frozen, unsure whether to continue serving guests or simply watch what was unfolding. I remained where I was. There was no reason to move. General Vance stopped a few feet in front of me. For a brief moment, neither of us spoke. He studied my face carefully, as though confirming that what he was seeing wasn't some trick of the light. Then something happened that no one present could have imagined. The legendary four-star general, the man whose decisions affected thousands of soldiers around the world, slowly removed his dress cap. Holding it respectfully against his chest, he lowered his head. A murmur swept through the crowd. Brandon frowned in confusion. Dad. General Vance didn't answer. Instead, he took one deliberate step forward. Then another. And before anyone could understand what was happening, he dropped onto one knee. The sharp crunch of gravel beneath his polished boot echoed through the silent courtyard. An audible gasp rose from the guests. Someone dropped a champagne glass. It shattered against the stone walkway. No one even looked in its direction. Every person was staring at the same unbelievable scene. The highest-ranking officer at the wedding, kneeling before the woman who had just been called an embarrassment. General Vance looked up at me with unmistakable respect. Director Miller. His voice carried across the courtyard with calm authority. I had no idea you were the bride's sister. Complete silence. If I had known, he continued, I would have personally arranged your escort and welcomed you as our guest of honor. The world seemed to stop. Behind him, Chloe's mouth slowly fell open. Her face lost every trace of color. What? She looked from me to the general and back again. General. Her voice barely came out. What are you doing? No one answered. The general rose to his feet and extended his hand. It is an honor to see you again, ma'am. I accepted the handshake with a small smile. It's good to see you too, General. The handshake lasted only a moment. Professional. Respectful. Nothing more. But to everyone watching, it looked as though two world leaders had just greeted each other. Brandon blinked several times. He looked at his father as if he'd never seen him behave this way before. Dad. What is going on? General Vance turned slowly. His expression hardened the instant his eyes landed on Chloe. You referred to Director Miller as. He paused. A low-level government contractor. Chloe swallowed nervously. I thought. You thought? I didn't know. General Vance's voice remained calm. But anyone familiar with military discipline knew calm could be far more frightening than shouting. You believed the woman standing before you was beneath your social standing. I wasn't trying to. You instructed security to remove her. You mocked her clothing. You rejected her wedding gift. I. Each sentence struck like another hammer against already cracking stone. Finally Chloe blurted out the only explanation she had left. She's always dressed like this. She pointed toward my suit. She drives an old car. She never talks about her job. She lives in a normal apartment. How was I supposed to know? General Vance looked genuinely disappointed. So your measure of a person's value, he said quietly, is the price of their suit? No. The car they drive? No. The neighborhood they live in? No. Her confidence was evaporating with every passing second. She searched desperately for words. I assumed. Exactly. General Vance nodded once. You assumed. The crowd remained perfectly still. No one dared interrupt. One elderly senator quietly whispered something to the woman beside him. A federal judge standing nearby adjusted his glasses and looked at me with growing curiosity. Several active duty officers exchanged confused glances. Director Miller? Which Director Miller? Surely. Not. General Vance answered the question before anyone asked it. 10 years ago. His voice carried clearly across the courtyard. My unit was conducting a classified operation in eastern Afghanistan. Several retired military officers in the audience straightened immediately. They recognized the seriousness in his tone. We were ambushed. His eyes briefly looked beyond the estate, as though seeing another place entirely. 3 enemy groups closed in simultaneously. Our communications were destroyed. Our extraction helicopters were forced to turn back. He took a slow breath. For 17 hours. We believed no one knew where we were. The courtyard had become so quiet that the fountain behind us sounded almost deafening. General Vance looked directly at me. Then, just before sunrise, a rescue team appeared. He smiled faintly. They didn't arrive with tanks. They didn't arrive with overwhelming numbers. They arrived with precision. They knew exactly where we were. They knew exactly where the enemy positions were. They knew exactly how much time remained before we were completely overrun. Several guests exchanged puzzled looks. General Vance continued. The operation had been planned by one person. He gestured toward me. Director Austin Miller. Gasps echoed once again. The woman standing before you coordinated intelligence from 5 different agencies. She redirected satellites. She authorized resources that technically didn't even exist. She assembled a rescue force in less than 4 hours. She remained inside the command center for 22 consecutive hours. His voice became quieter. And because of her, I am alive. He looked around the courtyard. So are 50 members of my command. Several retired officers instinctively stood straighter. One elderly colonel slowly placed his hand over his heart. General Vance wasn't finished. That operation received no headlines. No medals were awarded publicly. No interviews were given. Most Americans will never know it happened. Because classified heroes rarely become famous. He turned back toward Chloe. But make no mistake. The woman you called an embarrassment is one of the finest public servants this nation has ever produced. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even Chloe seemed unable to breathe. General Vance continued. Today, Director Miller serves as director of the Special Defense Intelligence Directorate. A wave of stunned whispers spread through the guests. She oversees strategic intelligence at the highest level. She approves operations that most of us never hear about. My command's annual budget. He tapped his own chest lightly. Requires her authorization. My strategic deployments require her approval. My intelligence briefings often begin on her desk. He looked toward Brandon. My son. If Director Miller requests a meeting, I clear my calendar. Brandon stared at me in complete disbelief. His lips parted slightly. He looked back at his father. You mean this Director Miller? General Vance nodded once. The very same. Brandon slowly turned toward me. His entire expression changed. Gone was the casual confidence of a wealthy groom. Standing before me now was a man realizing he'd unknowingly allowed his future wife to humiliate someone whose reputation commanded respect at the highest levels of government. He took several careful steps forward. Director Miller. His voice was almost hesitant. He stopped. Finding words suddenly seemed impossible. I owe you an apology. I offered a small, reassuring smile. You don't owe me anything, Brandon. Oh. He shook his head. I absolutely do. I welcomed hundreds of guests today. And somehow failed to welcome the one person who deserved it most. Around us, guests who had ignored me minutes earlier suddenly began looking at me very differently. Some nodded respectfully. Others looked embarrassed. The same people who had whispered about my inexpensive suit were now quietly wondering how they had failed to recognize someone whose influence extended far beyond anything money alone could buy. One woman who had laughed earlier slowly lowered her eyes. Another guest discreetly stepped away, clearly uncomfortable remembering the comments she'd made only moments before. None of it mattered to me. Respect born from titles isn't real respect. It's merely recognition of power. The respect that truly matters is how you treat someone before you know who they are. And that lesson was only beginning to unfold. The silence lingered for several long seconds. No one seemed to know what to say. The music had stopped completely. The laughter that had filled the estate only minutes earlier had vanished, replaced by the quiet weight of uncomfortable realization. I looked down at the small velvet gift box resting on the stone table. It was still exactly where I had placed it. Untouched. Unwanted. For a moment, I thought about taking it back. Then I decided against it. It wasn't just a wedding gift anymore. It was a reminder that I had come here with kindness, even after being rejected. I picked it up and gently placed it back on the table. Congratulations, Chloe, I said softly. I truly hope you have a happy marriage. I turned toward my car. Behind me, I heard hurried footsteps crunching across the gravel. Austin. Chloe's voice broke as she called my name. Please, wait. I stopped but didn't turn around immediately. When I finally faced her, she no longer looked like the confident bride who had marched down the marble staircase. Mascara streaked her cheeks. Her carefully prepared smile had disappeared. Her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold up the front of her wedding dress. She looked frightened. Not because of me. Because, for the first time in years, the image she had spent so much energy protecting had shattered in front of everyone she wanted to impress. She stood only a few feet away. Austin. Fresh tears rolled down her face. I didn't know. Her voice cracked. I swear. I had no idea. I nodded slowly. I know. You have to believe me. I do. I never imagined. She looked toward General Vance. I thought you were. She couldn't finish the sentence. Ain't nobody? I asked gently. She lowered her head. I was wrong. No. I answered quietly. You were uninformed. She looked up hopefully. For just a second, she thought I was forgiving her. Then I continued. But that's not what hurt. The hope disappeared from her face. The painful part. I said softly. Is that you believed someone you thought was ordinary deserved to be treated like they didn't matter? She opened her mouth to respond. No words came. When Mom died. I continued. You were 16. You couldn't sleep without leaving your bedroom light on. Her shoulders began shaking. I remember making grilled cheese sandwiches at midnight because they were the only thing you could eat when you were upset. She covered her mouth. I remember helping you fill out college applications. I remember sitting outside your dorm after dropping you off because I cried the entire drive home. I remember working 70-hour weeks so you'd never have to worry about tuition. I remember every birthday. Every Christmas. Every graduation. I remember all of it. My voice never rose. I wasn't trying to embarrass her. I simply wanted her to remember the life we'd shared. I never expected repayment. I never expected praise. I certainly never expected you to tell people who I was. I only expected one thing. She whispered through her tears. What? That you'd never be ashamed of me. The words hit her harder than anything General Vance had said. Her knees nearly gave out. She covered her face and began sobbing. I'm sorry. She whispered it once. Then again. And again. I'm so sorry. I was stupid. I cared too much about appearances. I wanted Brandon's family to like me. I thought. She shook her head violently. I don't even know what I was thinking. You were thinking about status. I replied. And somewhere along the way, you forgot about people. She stepped closer. No. I forgot about you. Behind her, Brandon slowly approached. His face carried genuine regret. He stopped a respectful distance away. Director Miller. He spoke carefully. I don't know if this means anything now. But I'd like to apologize. This should never have happened. You were my guest whether I knew your position or not. I failed to ask questions. I failed to stop what happened. I'm sorry. I appreciated that he wasn't apologizing because of my title. His expression told me he finally understood the real issue. I smiled politely. Thank you. General Vance joined us a moment later. The disappointment on his face had not faded. He looked at Chloe for several seconds before speaking. When Brandon first told me about you, he said quietly. He described you as kind. He described you as humble. He described you as someone who valued family. I was happy. He sighed deeply. But today, I watched you attempt to erase the person who sacrificed the most for you. Chloe lowered her head. I know. No. General Vance answered. I don't believe you do. His voice wasn't angry. It was saddened. There are young men and women serving this country right now who owe their lives to Director Miller's decisions. Yet none of that matters to me today. He looked directly at her. What matters? Is that before anyone told you who she was? She was already your sister. Those words settled over the courtyard like a heavy blanket. No one dared interrupt. General Vance continued. My family has been blessed with influence. We have wealth. We have connections. But none of those things determine character. He glanced around at the guests who had gathered nearby. Character is revealed by how you treat the person who has nothing to offer you. His eyes returned to Chloe. You believed your sister had nothing to offer. You were terribly mistaken. Chloe wiped at her tears. I know. General Vance slowly shook his head. I'm not talking about her position. I'm talking about her heart. You were loved. You were protected. You were given opportunities because someone else quietly carried the burden. And instead of honoring that, you hid it. The words landed with devastating force. Several guests quietly looked away. Others nodded in silent agreement. One elderly woman discreetly wiped tears from her eyes. General Vance turned toward me. Director Miller. His posture straightened instinctively. If you wish, I will cancel this wedding immediately. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Chloe's eyes widened. General. Her voice trembled. No. She looked toward Brandon. Then back at his father. Please. General Vance remained silent. He wasn't making a threat. He was offering me a choice. Every eye turned toward me. I took a slow breath. Then smiled gently. No. The single word seemed to surprise everyone. This is their wedding day. I looked at Chloe. I didn't come here to punish anyone. I came because despite everything, I still wanted my little sister to receive a wedding gift. I picked up the velvet box one last time and placed it into Chloe's shaking hands. She stared down at it as tears continued falling. I hope one day, I said softly, you'll understand that respect should never depend on someone's job, income, clothes, or address. It should depend on the kind of person they are. She nodded through uncontrollable sobs. I will. I promise. I hope you do. I turned toward Brandon. Take care of her. He nodded immediately. I will. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she learns from today. I smiled. I hope you both do. Without another word, I walked back toward my sedan. The same old sedan Chloe had been embarrassed to let people see. As I opened the driver's door, I noticed something unexpected. The valet who had greeted me earlier was standing beside the car. He had quietly cleaned the windshield. Before handing me the keys, he looked at me with quiet admiration. Thank you for your service, ma'am. I smiled. Thank you. He wasn't thanking me because he knew my title. He was thanking me because he had witnessed something much more important. Kindness. I climbed into the driver's seat. The engine started with its familiar, dependable hum. As I slowly drove toward the estate gates, I glanced into the rearview mirror one last time. Chloe stood in the middle of the driveway holding the small velvet gift box against her chest. Brandon stood beside her, one arm around her shoulders. General Vance remained a few steps behind them, watching quietly. No one waved. No one tried to stop me again. They simply watched as the ordinary-looking sedan disappeared down the long tree-lined driveway. For most of my career, I had lived by one simple rule. Never seek recognition. If the mission succeeds, let others take the spotlight. Go home quietly. Start preparing for the next responsibility. That philosophy had served me well. Real honor was never found in medals. Never in job titles. Never in expensive suits. It was found in integrity. In loyalty. In doing the right thing even when no one was watching. As the estate disappeared behind me, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel sad anymore. I felt peaceful. Because the greatest lesson of that day wasn't that a powerful general had recognized me. It was that the people who judged me by my appearance had revealed far more about themselves than they ever could about me. And sometimes, the strongest response to disrespect isn't revenge. It's walking away with your dignity intact, knowing your character speaks louder than any title ever will. If this story reminded you that true worth can never be measured by wealth, appearance, or status, let me know in the comments what you would have done in Austin's place. And if you believe kindness, humility, and character still matter in today's world, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next story.